Please give a huge hand to Tom Henfrey.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and I'd like to start by mentioning somebody who's been a great inspiration to me and a great many other people who passed away just a week ago yesterday. Bill Mollison, who's best known for being the co-creator and main popularizer of permaculture that he invented along with David Holmgren in Australia in the 1970s. He was in his late 80s and apparently passed away peacefully. And he through his teaching, permaculture has, we estimate, around 3 million active practitioners worldwide in around 140 countries. And you can trace a direct link between every single one of those through a chain of courses in permaculture that dates back to courses originally taught by Bill Mollison. He's been a profound influence on my life and that of many other people. So I'd just like to take a moment to reflect on and celebrate his legacy and achievements. So just checking in on the background knowledge, I'd wonder if you could just raise your hands if you've heard of permaculture. So almost everybody, and keep your hand up if you know what it is. That's a nice, modest response, and I think one that gratifies me. And as permaculture is often confused with specific applications like in agroecology, organic gardening, but when I'm asked to define it, I usually like to say that it's a system for the design of the conscious design of human habitats. It's based on observation of nature and learning from nature. So in that respect, it's very similar to biomimicry. And what I really want to emphasize for this talk is that it's explicitly rooted in three interdependent and overlapping ethics, which are illustrated on the right. So earth care, people care, and fair shares. They're sometimes termed differently, but I think they make permaculture a really useful place to start this talk. They correspond with the themes of the conference: economy, people, planet. And I think they reflect the contrast between the world that we're trying to create, the world that we're seeking to transition to, and the world we have now and the dominant values that shape mainstream society. And I think Barb expressed it really, really well when she said this morning that we've got everything backwards. We've begun to think that, and it's been expressed through programs like austerity that are treating support of social welfare, taking care of the natural resources that support that, and doing all of that in a way that's as equitable as possible, as not the core functions of the economy, but as disposable side issues that we can leave behind in order, in effect, to maintain unsustainable levels of inequality. The explicit attention to ethics also incidentally addresses the important question that came up about biomimicry yesterday, about not emulating the shadow aspects of nature. So we're not naively seeking to emulate nature. We're learning from it through these filters that locate permaculture very much at the intersection of these three ethics. So last time I was in this part of the world, a few months ago in London at a symposium on degrowth, Krista Victoric gave a really interesting paper that she talked about what she called the externalization of care, this phenomenon of forgetting about the importance of the caring functions of our economy. So we have this situation where in order to perpetuate this endless growth in the money supply, people are socially pressured to act in ways that were very nicely summed up a few years ago in a seminar on the shorter working week by Professor Tim Jackson, the sustainability economist. So he said that this drive to constant consumption is about spending money we don't have on things we don't need, to make impressions that don't last, on people whose opinions don't matter to us. I may have misquoted him slightly, I wrote it from memory. But the reasons people act in this quite bizarre and counterproductive way aren't because they've thought about it. If you think about it as we did in the workshop on work-life balance yesterday, you start to question that, you start to think about decluttering, cutting down your financial expectations, simplifying your life. So I believe that when people buy into this endless round of consumption, they're actually acting out social roles that are prescribed by cultural expectations, which are artifacts of this fallacy that economy and society are about supporting endless growth in the money supply and not about supplying for the needs of people in sustainable and equitable ways. So the ability to externalize depends on there being somewhere else to externalize to. And one way of mapping aspects of that is this nice graphic that comes from the transition training of transition networks. So in this light green figure here is Britain and Ireland, if they're the actual size, and the whole green area, the dark green area, shows how big they'd need to be to support current levels of consumption if they were sustainable. So, and we're able to consume beyond our means because of colonial and post-colonial relationships, allowing us to use resources from other areas and export our environmental and social problems there. Our ability to access this one-off bonanza of fossil fuels, which is depleting, and of depleting natural capital. And the fact that our society has been shaped over centuries of access to fossil fuels, access to other people's land and resources, and the ability to use things unsustainably has, in my view, left us saddled with a whole worldview that's deeply entrenched in and shaped by this phenomenon of growth. And to me, that's the reason why whenever you try to promote social values, environmental values, equity, anything that's consistent with these free permaculture ethics and similar values, it always seems to be fighting against the grain. It really seems to be pushing against the status quo. And that's because the status quo has become established in this context of ability to externalize, which is rapidly disappearing. So in looking for alternatives, many people, myself included, have been influenced by indigenous and traditional societies that have long-term historical relationships with particular pieces of land. And there are various environmentalist discourses, Western discourses on indigenous peoples that project our own concepts of sustainability, conservation, and similar concepts onto them, which are a sometimes subtle and usually well-meaning form of cultural appropriation, projecting our perceived deficiencies of our own society and our aspirations for our society onto people who have very different outlooks and don't necessarily share those views, even if it's politically expedient for them to ally with them. So what I think we can learn from indigenous societies is the patterns that arise from the fact that by being restricted to the natural sources in geographically delimited areas, so having to live within ecological limits, and gone through several centuries of learning processes about doing that, have come up with ways, they've reconciled often very complex issues of integrating social and ecological reality. There's a really nice metaphor by Evan Eisenberg in the book The Ecology of Eden. He describes it as earth jazz, and a jazz soloist like John Coltrane, when he improvises, he isn't just playing anything. He's exploring a creative space within the structure of whatever song the rest of his group is playing. And he's in harmony, he's in rhythm, he's in tune with the beat of the song and the rest of the band that are holding that structure. And in this metaphor of Evan Eisenberg, he sees indigenous resource management as sustainable because it's doing a similar thing in terms of its relationship to nature. It limits and channels social and productive choices in ways which are consistent with this overall framework that's created within the limits of ecological and physical and biological realities. A nice example from the literature is some Tucano people of northwest Amazonia, based on anthropological studies by Gerardo Reichel-Dolmatov. And these people, they perceive their territory, or perceived their territory, their lands, as the limits of the world. They saw the world as this bounded system where a limited quantity of energy circulated from the sun through plants and animals and through humans, and then back into these natural cycles. And they enact all sorts of ritual prescriptions and prohibitions about when and where and how someone can hunt, fish, do other things that affect the biota, which in their view are about regulating these flows and playing their part in the ongoing production of nature, but in an ecologically informed analysis have outcomes that are consistent with sustainability. So very, very different premises, very, very different ideas, but very similar consequences. Emergent upon these thousands of very different societies that each have come up with their own socio-cultural systems for negotiating the ecological realities they live with is a phenomenon called biocultural diversity, which it's a concept that comes from collaborations between anthropologists and ecologists and other scientists and various indigenous and traditional peoples who are still living in ways that are closely connected to their ecological resource base. And it's based on observations of the close correlations between the occurrence of biological and cultural diversity. So this map shows in green the areas that have got the highest of the countries that have the highest numbers of endemic languages. In yellow or orange, the countries that have the highest numbers of endemic vertebrates. And in red, a far higher number is the countries that are on both lists. So there's some exceptions, particularly at high latitudes and some islands. But for the most part, the countries that are biologically richest are also those that are culturally richest. And this is true across taxa, across biological groupings, and it's also true at different scales. So in the previous map, it's not just because some very large countries have lots of both biological and cultural diversity. So this map shows the distribution of plant diversity, the darker shadings from yellow to brown, and of the occurrence of different languages. So each dot is the center of a particular minority language. So you can see that the areas that are darkest in terms of plant diversity are also the densest in terms of these dots. So the reason for this, there are three main reasons. One is that biological and cultural diversity have common threats. So when the forces of predatory capitalism enter an area and push the people off the land, they're often destroying both the biological diversity and the ability of the people to live in a culturally distinct fashion or indeed survive at all. They're both products of environmental heterogeneity. But what's most important, what I really want to emphasize here, is that it reflects the fact that biological and cultural diversity are mutually generative. So where you have very diverse and very varied ecology, then you need different cultural systems, you need different perspectives, different ways of life, different sets of social institutions and governance structures and ownership structures to accommodate those different ecological circumstances and realities. Cultural diversity is also generative of biological diversity. It translates into different management regimes, different ways of using the land, different selection pressures on crops. And so it's not just one way. There's this constant interplay. So this earth jazz at local level is like this glorious global symphony where human diversity, the range of possibilities of human life and existence, flourish and help to flourish this incredible range, this incredible natural diversity of the world that we're blessed to have access to and blessed to experience. These are instances of what one of my favorite theorists, Gregory Bateson, refers to as the ecology of mind. And the idea, simply put, that the diversity of subjective experience, the diversity of imagination, and the variety of our subjective worlds is in constant interplay with the outer world. So a uniform, homogenizing culture that's premised on this single, absurd and unachievable notion of endless growth will produce something like this very sterile and uniform, probably very productive over the short term, agricultural monoculture. So that's reflecting back a limitation in the range of perspectives and range of thinking that's in stark contrast to this, which is a swidden plot in Amazonia, by the looks of it, from the vegetation, that is vibrant, it's diverse, it's full of life because it's harmonious with and continuous with the ecological processes that are happening in the wider forest. My conviction is the reason I work with grassroots initiatives and my conviction about why they're successful and why they're the best instances where on small scales people from backgrounds such as ours have made significant steps towards more sustainable lives and more sustainable lifestyles is because they've embraced this need for social and cultural creativity and been prepared to develop new ways of organizing, of doing things, of living and working together, new ways of seeing and understanding and structuring our relationships with the world that emulate this historical biocultural diversity that's represented by the range of indigenous peoples that still, despite great pressures, survive on the earth today. And I've coined the term earth punk. It's something that has to be countercultural. It's something that goes against the grain. It goes against the established ways of seeing and doing things, and it's something that we're having to do ourselves. We've seen loads of wonderful examples in the talks, in the torchbearers, in the different organisations and projects represented here. So for example, we heard this morning from Rasmus how making sustainability the basis of architecture is forcing us to reconceptualise urban space and the types of relationships that arise there and that it arises from. We heard in Valerie's talk how when we get deep into the concept of work-life balance and beyond it, that forces us to come up with notions of what time is and what work is that very much challenge and rebel against the conventional ones. We have to think about them very differently. From my personal experience, until about a year or so ago, I lived in Bristol, and one of the things I miss most about there is the Bristol pound. The idea I could do almost all of my shopping in a currency that was created and owned by the community, for the community, and that expressed a completely different set of values from those behind sterling, the national currency, and even down to the imagery and the pictures of them, that's classic Bristol sustainability activism there on the £1 note. And when I hope that next time I come back to Copenhagen, I'll have the pleasure of seeing these complementary currencies you're developing now up and running, ready to use. So I'm looking forward to spending the first, whatever you call your Copenhagen money. So we've had lots of talk about waste, and when we start to locate ourselves in the circular economy and to reconceive waste, not as something we can throw away, as something we have to deal with, then again that radically changes our attitude and our outlook. So the guys from Beyond Coffee, I bet since they've been doing that work, every single coffee shop, they don't see it anymore in the same way. They'll look at it and they'll say, "Ooh, mushroom food." And to actually grow a fungus, to grow a mushroom and see that waste can transform into something that's that beautiful and tasty and nutritious is a real glorious experience that I'd recommend to everybody to get one of these mushroom growing kits and take it home. Maya's project with the refugee, within the refugee camps, this dominant notion that refugees are somehow waste or surplus people, that they're a problem that the welcoming states have to deal with, and not people who are coming with energy and skills and perspective that should not only be welcomed, have vital contributions to make. And that's, again, a radical transformation of the status quo. And we see it in the ways that through organising cooperatively, these fishing co-ops are able to respond to changes in the legislation that have undermined local economies and fishing cultures elsewhere by actually strengthening their livelihoods and their community. And Omstilling itself, I've been really delighted to be welcomed and looked after so well by all the Omstilling people, and impressed by what you have as this amazing network of caring and supportive and like-minded people. So I see many of you going out into professional fields where you're perhaps a lone voice, perhaps a different voice, but it's not hard being the only person talking reason in an insane world. It's not easy. I mean, it's very hard. And to have this nurturing community to come back to and to strengthen and sustain you, it's wonderful to see. I've loved my welcome, and those of you who are tempted to join Omstilling, I could think of nothing better you could do. Some of the most important work I'm involved in at the moment involves addressing the issues of how we scale up this change. We've achieved some great successes in grassroots movements like the permaculture movement, the eco-village movement of intentional communities that have acted as niches, as safe spaces where we can explore new techniques, new ideas, new ways of doing things, and the transition network of community-based initiatives to promote fair, sustainable, happy, prosperous local economies, and taking many techniques from permaculture and out of eco-villages and seeking to apply them in established communities. Within the past few years, key organisations and networks representing all these movements, along with specialised organisations in research, education, communication, and some to do with local government, have come together at European level to create ecology, a network of networks that seeks to allow us to collaborate, to cooperate, to share and learn together at this wider scales than we've been doing before, and to provide a common platform for seeking to bring about the necessary changes at political scale. And Omstilling is doing that at national level. There's a realisation that great as our achievements might be, there's only so far we can go without changes in the structural conditions influenced by government. There's a need for political change to allow us to go any further. So we're starting to seek how we can explore that space at EU level and support national efforts without compromising the values, the ethics, the principles and methods that have already taken us so far, and hope to bring government our way rather than going the other. One Ecology project is inspired by, just last week, one of our members, the French Transition Network, organised a National Transition Day where over 300 projects and initiatives over the country showcased and celebrated what they're doing. So we've decided to scale that up to European level, and I think this may be the first public event where this has been announced. We've set September 23rd next year is the European Day of Sustainable Communities, and there's an invitation here for all of you who are involved in this type of work to sign up, join in, and take the opportunity to celebrate together and show the world what we're doing. This is so punctual that you still can't register until we get our new website up and running in a couple of weeks' time. But I'd really like to open this opportunity, this invitation to you, and to recognise the fact that it's a real privilege to be alive in itself, and particularly to be alive at this point in time where humanity is facing unique challenges, and we're able and willing, we've got the courage to step up and play our part in addressing those challenges. All the work that I've seen here during my weekend in Copenhagen, all that you're doing and all that you're seeking to achieve, it's remarkable, it's inspirational, it's worth celebrating, and I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for all you do. Thank you.